I'm Levar Stoney, the mayor of the great city of Richmond.
And I'm Ellen Robertson. I am the Vice President of Richmond City Council, and I am the City Council person for the great 6th District.
You know, I joined public service partly because of the inspiration of my grandmother and my father. My grandmother was a domestic laborer. She spent most of her early life working in people's homes in the Deep South. My father was a custodian, never graduated from high school, was a convicted felon. And they made a lot of sacrifices, poured a lot of love into me to allow me this opportunity, this great opportunity I get to actually serve others. And I thought the best way I could repay them for all the sacrifice, for all that love, was to join public service. The first time I felt there was like an injustice, I thought, this is just unfair, something's not right here, was when we had a basketball court with a hoop. It was a half court, and it would break down. The rim would break, and but the apartment complex would never replace the rim. I decided, this was risky at the time, I was going to write the management a letter. And so I wrote a letter, hand wrote it, delivered it, and it was fixed. And that was the first time I actually ever used my voice. Yeah. I was just a young 10 or 11-year-old. Wow. First time I used my voice, and that's sort of how I landed in public service.
My real experience with getting into government and getting into equality and justice for all happened shortly after I got married. My husband and I moved to Holland Park, where I still live. We bought our home, first home there, and I fell in love with the house, right? And I got on my bicycle and I went for a ride in the community. And there was just so many blighted houses. Richmond looks super, super, super fantastic today compared to what it was then, And I kept saying, oh, this is just a spot, it's gonna go away. And the farther I went away from my home, the worse it got. And I stopped at the first house that a lady was sitting on the porch. And I introduced myself and I asked her, what happened in this community? And she told me the story. She told me the story of redlining. She told me the story of housing discrimination. She told me the story of white flight. And by the time I got home, I got off my bicycle. The guy that lived across the street from me was a real estate agent. And I said to him, put my house on the market, I'm moving. I'm not living here. So he let me cry and cry and cry. And then he said to me, and I'll never forget this, and the pain, I can still feel the burn. He said to me, he's a young man with 3 children, all going to Richmond Public Schools. He's a realtor. And he said to me, Ellen, tell me one thing. Who deserves to live in this community if you don't?
Wow.
Yeah. And so, I got my little sass on and said, okay, dude, I'll stay. But I tell you what, if you're willing to work with me, we'll fix the community. And I won't leave until we fix the community. We worked Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night for almost 2-3 years, putting together a plan and put together all the data, all of the documents that we needed. We set up a nonprofit organization. We went to HUD. We asked for a down payment grant for first-time home buyers if they were bankable, and brought in first-time homeowners, and that's how it all began. It's been a fabulous experience, and now you know what's happening in the communities.
What a journey.
Yeah.
What a journey.
Yeah.
The two that stand out the most for me, one is public education and the other is housing. And I think the two are intertwined. Mm-hmm. You heard Ellen talk about Richmond's history with redlining. That stain still lives with us. It still lives with us. because lay out a dot map of where black people live in the city, where white people live in the city, where Latino people live in the city, and it's very segregated. I don't know of a community in the city that is intermixed really.
Not really.
And the intermixing is occurring now with white residents moving into areas that were once redlined. And so I think housing is a real inequity in this city. And you tell me where a person lives, we can tell you their educational achievement, we can tell you their life expectancy. It is, to me, startling because, yes, we've made progress, but that to me stands out as one of the biggest inequities we have. And then it sort of spills over into our education system as well, because the census tracts, which are the lowest socioeconomic census tracts, also have the lowest test scores, the lowest, and then the facilities are also are in the worst shape. But we could solve the question of better housing in Richmond. We will also solve the question of better education for our students and our kids as well. The two are intertwined, and I think they're the biggest inequities we've had in this city, and it goes back a long, long time ago.
So when we started the nonprofit organization in Highland Park, I went back out there on that bicycle, and I rode that bicycle and I knocked on every door. But I asked a larger question: what would make a difference? And the reason why we started off with home ownership was because that's what the people told us. They said, you know, we are not able to build wealth renting property that is not well kept up. And frequently we find ourselves not being stable and not being able to build community. And we were encouraged as an organization by the banking industry and so forth to do rental housing, because as a corporation, our potential for building wealth for the corporation was greater with rental properties. And we made a conscious decision that no, that's not the reason why we started the nonprofit organization. We started it to help people. So housing is really, really critical to the success of where we are. As we move forward, if you want me to say what does an equitable community, it looks like what people envision America being, but it includes all.
Making the words of those founding documents come to life, right? I mean, that's what you want. And for me, that equitable community, for me, it's twofold, right? First, it's accessible and affordable housing in all neighborhoods, in all corners. Can't be concentrated just in the east end of Richmond or south side Richmond or in Highland. No, it has to be every neighborhood, okay? Everyone has to be a part of this, this team effort. Number two, for me, is there are communities, particularly the big six, in public housing that just, for me, the fact that that housing is still around some 70 and 80 years later, that is problematic. No one should be living in those sort of conditions, I think. And for too long, the city, RRHA, we've punted the ball on that one, saying someone else is going to fix our problems or this, that, and the other. I think the time is now to act and provide those residents with just better quality housing, period. And to me, that will create a more equitable community, because we are only strong as our weakest link. We can build all the tall buildings in the world if we want to, right? That create all, but if we still have people living a mile away, living in those sort of conditions, then to me, that's a reflection of who we are and where we are as a city. As we grow, we got to grow with some intentionality, right? And with a lens on equity on that intentionality.
The wealth disparity in the city of Richmond is so tremendous that the formula that is used to determine how much money comes to the city, we get less than Chesterfield and Henrico because of our wealth disparity, not because we don't have the majority of institutionalized poverty for years. And so regionalism and revenue sharing from a regional perspective needs to be addressed, because a lot of the resources and benefits that go to our surrounding county, we are not eligible for. And so there's a lot of just governmental structure that needs to be addressed if we're going to correct these situations.
And I love what Ellen said about our affluence in this city is so great that even though we have a city that is roughly 21, 23% poverty, the affluence is so great that on paper, when using this formula to provide us funds for funding public education, it makes us look like we're a rich community.
We're rich.
Right? Doesn't tell the full story.
Yeah.
Doesn't tell the full story.
Yeah.
I think to move us to a more equitable place as a city, we have to first recognize that this movement towards equity isn't just a one summer sort of thing. It's not a 1 year thing. I see the great equity test for us being in 2030. And why do I say 2030? Because after what occurred in 2020, with the pandemic, the recession, and the civil unrest, a lot of it centered around what some called a reckoning on race. And some want to know, have we reckoned with our past just yet? And I said, we'll find out in 2030, right? Because we know now there are some serious disparities amongst us. A lot of us already knew this already, but for the first time when we had to slow down, those disparities, those injustices were essentially thrown in our faces, right? A mirror was put up into our face and said, do y'all like the reflections that coming back? And for the first time, without all the stuff that we have in the world, our activity in life, slowed down to a halt, we got a moment to step back and say, I don't like that. That's not the city I want to be or the city I want to live in. So now we have a decade for redemption, I say. A major test is this next decade. Can we close the gaps in housing and in public education and in generational wealth building? That's the test, the moment that's before us. That's how I think we get to a more equitable city. And it's going to take a lot of hard work.
The disinvestment and discrimination that has been experienced for years is not going to be easily rectified. When we speak to the community, it's telling our stories. It's what we're doing today. It's being factual about why we are where we are, especially African Americans in this country, but others as well, that have been disenfranchised by policies and laws that allowed such to be. The community needs to know the real story, and the community needs to see where things are still in place that allows for those things to happen. We're facing lots of gentrification in the city of Richmond. This is like a repeat of history, okay? And so seniors that own their own homes or moderate income families that have owned their homes are losing their homes in the city of Richmond. We did a study a couple of years ago about the tax abatement that showed us those investment dollars went to communities that already had an upper hand. I live in Highland Park. Houses are now being assessed at, $300,000. My neighbor who lives on a fixed income is concerned about whether or not she can pay her real estate taxes and whether or not the code man is going to come by and ding her for every little thing that's not fixed. And then you got the real estate guy knocking on your door say, hey, I'll give you, $150,000 cash, right? And so there you go. That same cycle happening again. The first time I went to Wickham Court as a part of election or after, I don't recall. That was the most cohesive community that I went in. Everybody was auntie, everybody knew everybody's children, and yeah, gold bar, a cup of sugar was real. And there was community, I mean, really. And so
That's at its finest, right?
it was at its finest. It was really at its finest. And I think that we have not honed in and treasured those real fabric of who we are. And that's what is going to be fundamental to the fabric that is needed in order for us to build our communities, to be strong and to be bold and to be courageous and say what has to be said. And, holding elected officials accountable is not just about coming down and talking about what hasn't been done. It's about being a part of the effort of creating the policies and the methods of being able to make it be done and be there to serve. That's what really it's all about.
I think this decade is the moment for community. It's the moment for particularly Black voices. And here's the thing, I got the utmost respect for our white allies in a city like Richmond, which has, as you know, a divisive past. And so to see people coming together behind racial equity and fighting back injustice, that's a beautiful sight.
It is.
However, I still believe that this is a moment for Black voices, Black activists, Black executives, Black business people, Black elected officials, whoever they may be. To my white allies, I would say, let this be the moment that their voices are prioritized in this conversation. Folks want to help. The best way I think you can help is allowing for the community of Black voices to figure out the direction of what we want for our community instead of what you think is best for our community. Sometimes I think that's missed in the entirety of the discussion, and I think that needs to be prioritized in this decade of redemption.